People are too focused on the wrong thing when it comes to Kenny Pickett and the Browns quarterback competition. I'll tell you what it is coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Kenny Pickett isn't guaranteed anything just because the Browns traded for him. Is Diontae Johnson misunderstood? He seems to think so. And could the Browns live to regret not bringing back Nick Chubb? I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content certain days and over the weekend sometimes as well. It's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also comment on anything we discuss today in that comment section. This is your team. So be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It sort of hit me this week during mandatory minicamp that I've sort of relied on this too much at times as well and used this as part of my logic or reasoning behind certain things when it comes to Kenny Pickett. And I'm backing off of it now because I think it struck me today, like the idea that, well, the Browns added Kenny Pickett first. They traded for Kenny Pickett. They gave up draft capital for Kenny Pickett. Yes, that matters. It means they felt some value in terms of what he could bring to the table, that they wanted to find a way to get him, on their roster. And so they gave up a 5th round pick plus DTR to get him. And so I can wrap my head around the idea that does matter on some level, yes. But at the same time, it's relevant, but it's not relevant at the same time. On one hand, they traded for him, which tells you they felt strongly enough that he could offer them something. And I believe that role was they felt like he could be a backup for them, a solid, reliable backup if things go awry. I'm assuming they kind of went into the draft process thinking like, hey, maybe we end up with the top guy in this class and it's Cam Ward, something like that, and we feel good about it. Maybe Kirk Cousins, I think, was still on the table for them at that point. So they wanted to have a solid person, a solid player they could fall back on if something happened or there was an injury, whatever. Andrew Berry's talked before about how he really values the backup quarterback position, and the Browns have invested in that position in the past pretty heavily as far as backups are concerned because they feel that way. So I think that was kind of why they did what they did, why they traded for Kenny Pickett and brought him into this team. But I think lately what's gotten lost is people have used that as the reasoning why he should be the starter. Like, oh, well, because they traded for him, he's got the inside track. But like, I don't think they knew in mid-March they were going to take 2 quarterbacks in the NFL draft. I don't even think they had like a full picture of what their QB room was going to look like. I think they just said, hey, we can get Kenny Pickett. We feel decently strong. We feel decently about him enough that like, hey, he could be part of a competition. He could be our backup. If if we need to fall back to somebody to fall back on, if things don't work out or if there's an injury or whatever, like I think that's how they viewed him. And so I think that's all that move kind of was about at the time. And yes, they did. He even admitted it, like said he would have a chance to compete. What else are they going to say, right? Like they're going to tell most of these quarterbacks coming in, like you're going to have a chance to compete. But depending on who they would have ended up with, it would have been pretty obvious that like Pickett would have been second fiddle to a Cam Ward. If you're investing the number 1 or the number 2 overall pick, if it had been Cam Ward or whoever as a quarterback, like that guy would have been the starter. If they had traded for Kirk Cousins, I think it would have been pretty obvious they were leaning on Kirk Cousins being the starter. So the idea of acquiring Pickett at the time was more about backup role, so the idea that it's now, why is he now being etched in stone as the starter simply because, well, he's the guy they traded for and he's the guy that they added first. I'm not using that anymore. And I think I'm not going to say irresponsible, but I think it's just like I think you're looking or worried about the wrong thing if that's your stance on Pickett as to why he has a chance to make it as the team or be the starter week 1. I think the Browns hope he's their Sam Darnold, like that he's this reclamation project that really balls out, and that maybe if they did start him week 1, he'd go on to have this great season, revive his career, maybe price himself out of coming back to Cleveland, or maybe they'd re-sign him and they'd sort of bridge that gap until they get the franchise quarterback of their own, the same way the Vikings did with J.J. McCarthy, and he got hurt last year, and now he's taking over this year. But listen, if he's not that guy, if he's not their version of Sam Darnold from last season, and he struggles the way he has so far, I think during minicamp, by the way, and during the spring, the offseason program, like, these players aren't blind. They have to be able to sell to this locker room that they are trying and attempting to win. To me, starting Kenny Pickett, if he isn't playing well during training camp in the preseason, or others on the roster look better than him, like if any of these other quarterbacks look better than him the way they have right now going into the season, like, and you still start him, to me, that's a telltale sign that, like, they just don't care about winning. Like, they are trying to set themselves up for that top pick overall, that franchise changing quarterback that maybe they think is in next year's class and maybe wasn't in this year's class, whatever their sort of thought process is on that. But that's what that would tell me. It would not tell me that they were trying to be competitive and win right now, which is what on some level they have to try to sell to the players on this team. They you can't sit a team down in a team meeting and be like, all right, guys, season's coming, let's tank. Like, it's never gonna resonate. It's never gonna work. And you listen, you're smart enough to know that can't be the conversation. These players, they're paid too much. They put their bodies on the line to show up every day and go out there on Sundays and feel like it's all for naught, and that they're just their efforts are about getting the team better draft position rather than trying to win football games. You can't run a team that way. Kevin Stefanski certainly isn't going to do that. And so by the end of this thing, if Pickett is still struggling, if he's not performing as well as others in the room come August, and it's evident, it's going to have to be someone else who's starting. So I'm backing off the idea that just because they got Kenny Pickett first and he was the first guy they added, and that they added him via trade, so they felt strongly enough about him that they invested draft capital in him, and that's the big reasoning why they feel he's going to start. I'm not going to keep using that as an argument, because I think it's the wrong way to approach this thing. Like, I don't know. Like, he hasn't looked as good as the others. I think Flacco is the front runner moving forward for me. And to this point during minicamp, especially, like, he's taken very minimal snaps. Some people might read into that and say that's because he's the odd man out. I think it's the opposite. I think they feel so comfortable with what he brings to the table, understanding he's been in this offense before. He's done this. He's a 17-year veteran. Like, he has the experience. They don't need to see him in these settings that are more about learning anyway. And so I think they're just kind of saving it for, all right, well, he'll get his reps during training camp, and we know what Flacco brings to the table. Pickett is trying to pick some things up, and again, the context still applies to him. Yes, trying to learn. That's what this time of year is for, and he's getting used to the offense and all these different things. He's trying some things that maybe he wouldn't normally try. But at the same time, like, others are doing that as well, and they've looked better. Now, Pickett's doing it against the ones. Dylan Gabriel's had some snaps against the ones. I think, he has struggled in most of those. When he's against the twos and the threes, he's looked really good. Shedeur Sanders against the twos and the threes, and he has yet to take any snaps against the ones, has also looked very good, as I talked about on yesterday's episode. All those things come into play. All those things are context as to why the stats that are being kept by some, or why, what the conversations around these guys are what they are. But it's important to keep that context in perspective in terms of, like, what they're doing with who. But I do think in general, Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel have looked better than Kenny Pickett in the reps in opportunities they've been given. I also think they both had their best days on Wednesday. Dylan had a chance late in practice to do some 11-on-11 stuff against the threes, and he looked, it was probably his best 11-on-11 session. Shedeur held his own, as he's done in the reps with the twos in 11-on-11s. And I still think, though, like Flacco, even in the minimal snaps he's taking, like he just looks like he gets it, and he's a better player and quarterback than Kenny Pickett is. I think that's obvious at this stage. And so I have a hard time believing that like he won't be ahead of Pickett when the depth chart starts in like when they open up training camp in late July, and I think Flacco should probably be the front runner there. And I'm not going to sit here and subscribe to the idea that like just because they traded for him, he's the guy that is a shoo-in for the job. I think they're legitimately going to let that sort itself out, mostly between Flacco and Pickett when training camp rolls around, and they'll make a decision at the right time. Deontay Johnson believes that he's misunderstood. Even if he isn't, I think he and the Browns are actually a perfect pairing for where each are at in their current the current moment in time. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Say goodbye to sticky notes, scribbled plans on the fridge, and overlapping calendar invites. The Skylight calendar is here to bring clarity to the chaos and help families stay organized without stress. This sleek digital display syncs with your existing calendars, Google, Apple, Outlook, and more, making it simple to track appointments, practices, dinners, and reminders all in one easy-to-see place. If I had $1 for every time that I forgot about something that was on my family schedule, I could probably retire from doing this podcast. It happens all the time, leads to plenty of frustration in my house when I look at my wife with, like, she has 3 heads because she told me 17 times that we had some dinner or some event going on, and I completely blanked on what it was, didn't put it in my calendar, and now I'm sitting here looking like a moron. So the Skylight calendar has eased those stressful moments. It's made me remember and turn my forgetfulness into punctuality. And man, as are things better in my house because of it. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/NFL. Go to skylightcal.com/NFL for $30 off the 15-inch calendar. That's skylightcal.com/NFL. Deontay Johnson thinks that the narratives about him are misconstrued and wrong. He talked about it on Wednesday. First time we've had a chance to talk to him since he signed with Cleveland. First time he's really talked to anybody in quite some time since, last year, the tumultuous season that saw him bounce around between 3 teams, end up back in Baltimore. Baltimore re-signed him at the end of, or going into the playoffs, hoping that and just kind of stashed him, hoping they would get a comp pick. It's not coming because he didn't sign with the team which was the Browns until after the draft, which is, where the comp pick formula sort of ends is the Monday going into the draft is the cutoff date for that. So they won't get a comp pick. But was also as interesting as we talk about him signing with Cleveland is that he mentioned that no other teams called. It was just the Browns. They were the only team interested. So here he is in all his glory, trying to, I think in many respects save his career. Now, in terms of the narrative that he's misunderstood, I found his comments interesting because, of course, the person who's being criticized for certain things or a certain way of that he's held himself is going to say that. But there's what he's being characterized as, I think, is the problem here. I'm going to let you hear from him real quick. This was what he had to say about how he thinks, some things have been misconstrued about him. But I want to react on the other side and explain why I actually think, whether he's misunderstood or not, I think him and the Browns kind of found each other at the perfect time.
Sure. I don't like to speak on a lot of stuff, so I just, everybody going to have their opinions, you know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, I'm the only one in that room and really know what be going on, so I can only, everybody, like I said, they're entitled to their own opinion, so I can only go off of what I know and then try to go off what I, put out there, like in my best effort. But like I said, last year, I'm trying to turn and change that narrative and move the right way and just keep going.
So he says he's trying to change the narrative about himself. And what I think is going to be tough is there is no harder narrative for a player, and I think this is probably across all sports, to change or shake about themselves than being labeled a quitter or having like lack of effort. I mean, think about the last 4 years or so of narratives with Jedrick Wills, where people questioned his effort, his desire, his love for football. Like that is one of the hard, and I don't know that it's a love for football thing with Diontae. I think it's just like about like his effort in certain moments. I mean, think about also Juan Thornhill. The reason he's not on this team anymore is because, I mean, you can look back at one play in particular, the play where he gave up in the Saints game, chasing after a long touchdown play, and decided that was in his best interest at the time, and he said it was unbecoming of him, and that's fine, but it stands out in people's minds, and so like when effort becomes an issue, it's a real issue, and so that's a hard thing to shake when you're labeled a quitter or not having the effort to do certain things or want to do certain things. Johnson may not have, or like he may not want to have that scarlet letter of sorts to his name, but things that have transpired in games by him have paved the way for him to be, I think, marked that way. It is on some level like his own doing. So I don't know if this is like a lack of accountability. Maybe there's something that we don't know that went on there, but he has had an opportunity now to speak on it and explain his side of the story. He didn't do that. He chose not to. He kept it very vague, and that's his choice. He's fine to do that. He said people can be entitled to their opinions, but like this is how people feel about him because he didn't dive on a loose fumbled ball in a game ironically against the Browns. There was other concerns about like his lack of effort on the field when he was still in Pittsburgh that last year, and then this past season he flat out refused to enter a game for the Baltimore Ravens, got suspended for it, and that's like a kiss of death. Like when that is the narrative about, when that is something that you do, whatever the circumstances are, of course that's going to be a hard label to shake. And so he's working against that. He has to sort of battle against that throughout whatever's going to transpire for him in 2025 if he makes the roster or doesn't. And it's easier said than done, obviously, for any player, but obviously him as well. So that's what he's working against. But the reason that I think like him and the Browns kind of found each other at the right time and they're a perfect fit right now is that because of the circumstances that Johnson finds himself in, where he's viewed as this outcast, guy who doesn't care, whatever, lacks effort, quits, you name it, the list goes on, because that's the narrative about him. He's basically fighting for his NFL career right now. Like this theoretically could be his last chance. The fact that nobody else called other than the Browns, I think speaks to the fact that he knows or should understand that this, he might not get a lot of other opportunities, might not get any other opportunities if this doesn't work out. So he is probably playing or fighting for his job in his future in the NFL right now, and in some respects, right? On the flip side of that, the Browns are desperate for low risk, high reward type players like a Diontae Johnson. They are desperate for anybody that can come in on this team and make some plays. And so I say they found each other at the right time because Diontae needs to go to a place where he can, get opportunities, have a chance to prove that he can still do this at a high level, that he isn't the guy that he's saying he's being misconstrued as or misrepresented as. Okay, well, Cleveland's the perfect place to do that, which is why they're a perfect fit for him. They need wide receivers that can, maybe have a questionable past and need that opportunity or or could thrive from a fresh start, whatever you want to say. And they need guys who can perform at a high level because they don't have a very experienced group right now. Deontay Johnson at one point was a Pro Bowler. Like there is a Pro Bowl caliber player, a good NFL player in there somewhere, and they're hoping it still exists. He's still under 30. Like he's young enough where like you could certainly get that production if he stays on the straight and narrow, if he's focused, if he's not who some say he is. And so yes, it is that low risk, high reward potential scenario for Cleveland. And those are the types of players that they have to kind of bank on right now because of the financial situation they find themselves in, because of the Deshaun Watson trade and deal. And like their room doesn't have a lot of talent on it. It's Jerry Jeudy It's Cedric Tillman who, I think Cedric Tillman's proven some things, but has to do it more consistently. And that's about it. So Diontae is going to get opportunities. He's going to get reps. He's going to get balls thrown his way. And I think, you talk about the quarterback competition. There might be nobody who benefits more from somebody like Flacco starting than a Deontay Johnson, because Flacco's going to throw in the ball. He's going to help him look like that player he used to be again if he's starting under center. And so this is kind of like two people finding each other at the perfect time. Diontae needs this opportunity. He needs the reps to, out on the field to be able to get back on track and save his career. And the Browns, frankly, need wide receivers with the talent and skill set of Deontay Johnson. He's a great route runner, for example. Like, he can do some things. He can get open. He can make plays, because they don't have a lot of options at that position group specifically. So it could work out. It could end up being this match made in heaven that produces fruitful results in both. And then next year, maybe he's back, or maybe he's off somewhere else because he gets another payday and he earns it. And, the Browns maybe are the team paying him, or maybe they're moving on and finding the next great revival project at wide receiver. Who knows? But I do think right now, as things stand, like it's probably the perfect storm for both teams, for both parties, because they kind of both need each other at this juncture. If you miss Nick Chubb right now, just wait until he wins Comeback Player of the Year. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before the tip-off or live as it's going on, with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and, of course, win big. Pacers took game 3 of the series. They lead at 2-1, still have home court advantage on their side, but the Thunder have been juggernauts all year. Maybe you think the Thunder still pull this thing off in 6 and they rattle off 3 straight here. Maybe you think it's going 7 and it's going to be a highly contested series. Maybe you think Tyrese Halliburton's got another game-winning shot in him. All those options are available to you as you place bets through FanDuel and try to cash out and win big. And when you do cash out and win big, you get paid instantly. Head to FanDuel. If you're new, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Nick Chubb had his first press conference as a member of the Houston Texans on Wednesday. And I thought he had some interesting comments just about where he's at health-wise. A very positive injury update where he mentioned that he is – well, first I think the first thing he mentioned was that the injuries the last 2 years that cost him his season, the knee injury and then the broken foot, are behind him. He's over that hump. He said he feels better than he has felt in a while. He mentioned that with the knee injury specifically, it was always going to take about 2 years to recover and sort of get back to being a more reliable player, or a version of himself that he used to be. And there was a lot said about that last year. I think there was an understanding from the Browns, from people around the team that cover the team, fans, everybody, I think, kind of came to terms or understood that, it was going to take time for Nick Chubb to get back to that. It was the second time he had a serious knee injury like this. Most players coming back from something like that is almost impossible. For him, this otherworldly athlete, he was about to pull it off. And unfortunately, then the foot injury kind of derailed his season last year. But I think there were signs that he was getting more comfortable and getting back to a stronger version of Nick Chubb. But it wasn't enough for the Browns to feel inclined to re-sign him, obviously. And they didn't really get to realize over those last 3 games where he was trending. And so they stayed away from re-signing him. It is what it is, right? But the idea that it was going to take a little longer than, that was part of it too. He mentioned that this was like for a regular offseason for him. It wasn't about rehabbing. It wasn't about all that. It was like, no, he could just He was fine. He recovered from all his injuries. He could just put his head down, go do his lifts, go get his work in, go do his offseason training regimen to get ready for a season like he normally would. And that makes a big difference in terms of where he's at and how he's feeling. That stuff is massive. And so it does set the stage for Nick Chubb maybe getting closer or being closer to the player that he used to be in 2025 when the season opens up with the Houston Texans. And I think like if he looks like Nick Chubb, if he posts like 1,000+ yard season, scores like, 6, 7, 8 touchdowns, I think it's a fair question to wonder, like, will there be regret that he's not doing that here with the Browns? Now, I think there will always be a contingent of fans. Maybe you're one of them who would feel that way. Yes. Like who would miss Nick Chubb, who already misses Nick Chubb and will miss him more if he looks like the old Nick Chubb and he's doing it somewhere else. He's in a split backfield there with Joe Mixon. If there's a Joe Mixon injury like that, I think like the numbers will matter here a little bit too. Like if he goes out and has like a 2,000 yard season because Joe Mixon gets hurt and he's brilliant, like, yeah, there'll be some regret, I think, from a lot of different parties. If he has like 1,000 yard season in a supporting role with Mixon and they're sort of bouncing off each other, I think that the Browns can sort of survive the criticism there because I think the presence of Judkins helps ease some of that pain here in Cleveland. And listen, Judkins, it's glorified field day, I guess is maybe a good way to put it for like right now during this phase of the program, because there's not tackling. There's not a lot of, physical contact going on. Guys are easing up, things like that. But in this setting, Quinshon Judkins has looked great, which is what you would expect, because when you have a running back that can cut the way he does, who's as fast as he does, who runs as elusively as he does, and is like this power guy who can make some plays with his feet, and is as strong as he is, like you would expect him to just run away from guys when it's just like a track meet out there and there's no contact and hitting and whatever. And so, yes, I've used the word context a lot this episode. Context matters for all these players as we're evaluating them at this phase of where they're at. But he's looked awesome. There's been a couple times where like he's bounced a play outside with a crazy cut and you're just like left in awe. He had another good play on Wednesday where he was coming up the middle, made a nice couple moves and sort of broke free for a bigger gain. Like you're seeing how good he can be. And I do think he is going to be a great player. That eases the pain if Nick Chubb bounces back to being Nick Chubb. He would really have to struggle, and Nick Chubb would really have to light it up. Like I said, like a 2,000 yard season, I think, for people to feel regret, if you will, that he's not here. But I do think there will always be a little bit of regret if he bounces back to being Nick Chubb. And if he wins like comeback player of the year, of course there will be like a proud Papa type moment where it's like, oh, Nick Chubb, he grew up with us and he went out and he did it. He proved that he can overcome these injuries and defy the odds and get back to being such a great player. That would certainly have a little bit of a sting, but I don't know. Like, I don't think that it's the right mentality to have. Like, are they going to regret not having Nick Chubb? Because I think that undermines how good Quinshon Judkins has a chance to be. And again, I talked earlier this week, like comparing him to Nick Chubb or trying to say he's going to get there, I think is irresponsible because Nick Chubb had an aura about him that nobody can replicate. But keeping things in perspective, like this could end up working out just fine for the Browns, even if Chubb goes on to have this, a couple, however many more years of a solid career and adds to his rushing numbers and, makes himself a surefire Hall of Famer or whatever. Of course he's going to be missed. He's a fan favorite forever, but I don't know that it's a situation that ends with a ton of regret unless he really goes back to being like top 5 running back in the NFL, Nick Chubb, which in the situation he's in, I don't even know if that's going to be possible. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. More to come this week. I will reflect on the final day of mandatory minicamp, the camp as a whole, and set the stage for training camp at some point in the next several days, maybe Friday, maybe start of next week, I'm going to give you what my quarterback depth chart would be. So we'll have some fun with that. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button is the point, though, to make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day and make sure you're staying in the loop on all this stuff. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.